They say the countryside is where you go to find yourself. Me? I was running away. From a life that had chewed me up and spat me out. From a dream gone sour. And from a heart that felt like it had been stomped on one too many times. I thought I'd find peace in those endless fields. Just me and the quiet. But then I met him. He wasn't looking for peace. And he sure as hell wasn't looking for me. His name was Eric. And he was about to turn my whole world upside down. The Greyhound coughed to a stop just past the "Welcome to Harmony Creek" sign. And Alex knew this was it. Harmony Creek. Population. Barely a blip on the map. It felt a million miles from the cacophony of New York City. A desperate escape etched onto a bus ticket. His dreams of hitting the big time with his music had crashed and burned, leaving behind a trail of rejection letters and a gnawing sense of failure that followed him like a persistent shadow. The gigs had dried up. The rent was piling high. And the final nail in the coffin was Sarah, his ex, who'd apparently traded his melodies for a corporate lawyer's power chords. He'd seen the ad online, farmhand wanted. Room and board provided. It wasn't exactly glamorous, but the thought of fresh air, wide open spaces, and honest work was a siren song to his frazzled soul. He figured a little dirt under his fingernails might just be the therapy he needed. The farm, owned by a man named Eric, was even more isolated than he'd imagined. Locals whispered about Eric Carter, the recluse farmer. They said he'd become a ghost after his wife died, shutting himself off from the world, a lonely figure haunting his own land. Alex's heart ached for the man. He knew what it was like to be consumed by grief. As Alex walked the dusty road leading to the farm, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into a landscape of his own desolation. This wasn't just a physical escape, it was a last-ditch attempt to salvage something of himself. To find a rhythm to life beyond the broken chords of his past. He just hoped this Eric character wouldn't be as broken as he was. Because the only thing worse than being alone was being trapped in loneliness with someone else. And as the farmhouse loomed into view, stark against the setting sun, a sense of foreboding settled deep within Alex's chest. This was more than just a job, this was a leap of faith. And he had no idea what he'd find on the other side. Their first meeting felt more like a standoff than an introduction. Eric, a man weathered by the sun and silence, regarded Alex with a skepticism that was practically a physical presence. He was a study in rough edges, calloused hands, a jaw set like granite, and eyes that seemed to hold the weight of the world. Alex, still carrying traces of his city polish, felt instantly out of place, like a stray verse in a country song. As Alex settled into the routine of farm life, he started catching glimpses of a different Eric beneath the gruff exterior. He saw it in the way Eric cared for the animals, a gentle hand guiding a skittish mare, the soft murmurs he'd make to the cattle in the morning. He saw it in the way Eric surveyed the land, a possessive pride mixed with a deep, almost reverent respect for the soil. These quiet moments revealed a sensitivity Alex hadn't expected, a vulnerability that tugged at something deep inside him. He found himself drawn to Eric, not just out of sympathy, but with a growing, undeniable attraction. He dismissed it at first, telling himself it was just loneliness talking. But then came the accident with the tractor. Alex, clumsy and inexperienced, had nearly gotten crushed. It was Eric who'd reacted with lightning speed, pulling him to safety with a strength that belied his age. For a brief, terrifying moment, as Eric held him, checking for injuries, Alex felt a surge of something electric, something forbidden. After that, everything shifted. Every shared glance felt charged. Every casual touch lingered too long. Alex knew he was treading dangerous ground, his feelings growing stronger while Eric remained a closed book. He tried to ignore it, tried to focus on the work, but the quiet pull between them was becoming impossible to deny. He was falling, hard and fast, for the man who seemed determined to keep him at arm's length. And the fear of that fall, of being rejected, was starting to eat him alive. The storm rolled in like a freight train, tearing across the fields with a vengeance. Rain lashed against the windows of the farmhouse, and the wind howled like a banshee. They'd been working all day to secure the barn, but now the old farmhouse roof was taking a beating. Eric, grim-faced, yelled over the roar of the storm, "We gotta secure those loose shingles before they all fly off." They braved the elements, climbing onto the rickety roof with the wind threatening to rip them off. Just as they were hammering down the last shingle, a rogue gust ripped a section of the roof away, sending Eric tumbling down. Alex, heart leaping into his throat, scrambled down after him, finding Eric lying stunned in the mud. He wasn't seriously hurt, just shaken up. Back inside, soaked to the bone and shivering, Eric collapsed onto a chair, clutching his arm. Alex rushed to get a blanket and noticed something sticking out from under the cushions, a worn leather box. Driven by a curiosity he couldn't suppress, he opened it. Inside, nestled among faded ribbons, was a stack of letters. The top one, addressed to Eric, was postmarked just days before his wife's death. He read a few lines, enough to reveal a devastating secret: she hadn't died accidentally. It was suicide, driven by an illness she hadn't wanted to become a burden. Eric saw Alex reading the letter. Guilt and shame washed over his face. "Don't," he rasped, reaching out to grab it. In that charged moment, the storm seemed to fade into background noise. Alex, overwhelmed by the revelation and the raw pain etched on Eric's face, reached out and cupped Eric's cheek. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. The dam broke. Eric, his defenses crumbling, pulled Alex into a fierce embrace. And then, without thought or hesitation, they were kissing. The storm raged outside, mirroring the tempest of emotions swirling between them: grief, desire, and a desperate need for comfort in the face of unimaginable loss. The morning after the kiss was thick with unspoken regret and palpable tension. Eric was gone before sunrise, leaving Alex with a note scrawled on a scrap of paper: "Don't. I can't." It was a punch to the gut. Alex felt foolish, exposed. Had he completely misread everything? Was he just a rebound? A momentary distraction from Eric's grief? He paced the small room, wrestling with the urge to pack his bags and disappear. Maybe this small-town fantasy had been a mistake. Days turned into a strained silence. Eric avoided Alex, throwing himself into work with a manic energy. Alex, in turn, felt isolated and adrift, unsure of his place on the farm. The unspoken letter hung between them like a weapon. He saw the toll it was taking on Eric. The dark circles under his eyes, the haunted look in his gaze. He knew Eric was wrestling with demons he couldn't even name. One evening, a beat-up pickup truck rattled up the driveway. A woman, weathered but with a kind smile, stepped out. "I'm Sarah," she said, extending a hand. "Eric's sister. He told me you were here. Helping out." Sarah saw right through the carefully constructed facade. Over coffee in the kitchen, she revealed that Eric had been carrying the guilt of his wife's death for years. Blaming himself for not seeing the signs, for not being able to save her. He'd pushed everyone away, convinced he wasn't worthy of happiness. "He's scared, Alex," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "Scared of feeling, scared of living, but he's a good man. Deep down, you just gotta give him a reason to believe it again." Alex knew what he had to do. He couldn't leave. He couldn't abandon Eric to his grief. He had to fight for him, even if it meant facing rejection. Even if it meant tearing down the walls Eric had spent years building around his heart. Because somewhere beneath the pain and the silence, Alex knew there was a spark of hope, a chance for something real. And he wasn't ready to give up on that. Not yet. Armed with Sarah's words and fueled by a stubborn hope, Alex sought out Eric. He found him in the barn, his back to the world, meticulously cleaning a harness as if his life depended on it. "Eric," Alex started, his voice trembling slightly. "We need to talk." Eric didn't turn around. "There's nothing to talk about," he mumbled, his voice flat. "Yes, there is," Alex insisted, stepping closer. "About what happened, about the letter, about us." Eric finally turned, his eyes filled with a weary resignation. "It was a mistake, Alex. I was vulnerable. I shouldn't have." "It wasn't a mistake," Alex interrupted, his voice rising with emotion. "It was real. I know it was. And I'm not gonna pretend it didn't happen." "You're not going to pretend it didn't happen." Eric flinched, his gaze flickering away. I can't do this. I can't be what you need. I'm too broken." "Alex, you deserve someone better. Damn it, Eric." Alex exploded, his frustration boiling over. "Stop deciding what I deserve. I'm here. I'm telling you what I want. I want you, broken pieces and all. But I can't do this alone. I can't keep fighting for something you're not even willing to fight for yourself." He paused, his voice softening. "Look, I get it. You're scared, but I'm not going anywhere. I care about you, Eric, more than you know. But if you can't give me anything back, if you can't even try, then I need to leave. I can't stay here, hanging on to a ghost." He turned to walk away, his heart aching with a finality he didn't want to face. But then, he heard Eric's voice, barely a whisper, cracking the silence. "Don't go. All right, here's a 300-word paragraph for the resolution section." Written in authentic American English. Alex froze, his hand still on the barn door, the words hanging in the air. He slowly turned back to face Eric, his eyes searching Eric's face for any sign of change. This time, the stoicism was gone, replaced by a raw, unguarded vulnerability he'd never seen before. Eric's voice was hoarse, almost a sob. I'm scared, okay? I'm terrified of letting anyone in, of failing again. But I don't want you to go. God, Alex, I don't want you to go." Tears welled up in Alex's eyes, blurring his vision. He closed the distance between them, reaching out to cup Eric's face in his hands. "Hey," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "It's okay to be scared. We're in this together. Remember? We can take it slow. One step at a time." Eric leaned into Alex's touch, his body trembling. "I don't know how to do this. he confessed, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't know how to love again." "Then let me show you," Alex said, his voice filled with tenderness. "Just let me in. Let me help you carry some of that weight." Eric looked into Alex's eyes, searching for the truth, the promise, the unwavering support he so desperately needed. What he saw reflected back was a love that was unconditional, a belief in him that he hadn't felt in years. And in that moment, something shifted. The walls he'd built around his heart began to crumble. Brick by brick, he reached out, his calloused hand gently tracing the curve of Alex's cheek. "All right," he said, his voice stronger now, laced with a newfound resolve. "All right, let's figure this out together." He smiled, a small, hesitant smile, but it was enough. It was a crack of sunlight breaking through the darkness, a promise of hope on the horizon.